Hello, Junior Trendwatchers. Congratulations, you've reached the fun part of intervention design. You are now going to use your imagination for the upcoming couple of weeks. The frame that you came up with at the end of the Explore will now be translated into a fictional future world. And that is really nice to do. So the process is as follows. You first translate your frame to the near future or to a fictional world that is also happening right now. It's totally up to you. Also the time frame, you can choose 2025, 2030, totally up to you. So there is a lot of freedom here. Then you are going to build a fictional world around the trend that you came up with, around the frame. And then you are going to tell the story of the frame itself. We're going to use the following tools that you're already familiar with because you used them in TrendLab 1. The future cone, the pyramid of technology, storytelling, and a mood board and storyboard. Let's dive into the first one, the future cone. Forrest's future cone is already explained in the video about speculative design. It's really important not to think of your trend as something that is bound to be happening. Because then you could easily kind of extrapolate your trend to the near future. In intervention design and speculative design, we think that you as a designer can kind of mobilize people, your audience, to have an understanding of what is happening and maybe also alter a trend or make a specific trend that will, if you do nothing, not have an impact, because people now know about the trend. So you could say that this kind of exercise is really necessary to make your trend also kind of an ideological thing. This is a trend you really want to happen, and that's the preferable future. If it doesn't fit at the moment, then just reframe until your trend fits in the possible and the preferable. And you can use this kind of, visualization, but you can also make one of your own that looks even better. If we've done that, you are going to try and answer the question, why is this frame so important? Why do we do this exercise? Why is the trend or the couple of trends in our frame so important to come up with all these fuzz about it? So I think this is a really important one because it challenges you to think about your values. What are my values? What do I think the future should look like? What does society need to be? And link that to your trend and that to your frame. And that's the why question. Why is this for us so important? Well, not for us, but maybe also for society as a whole. If you've done that, you can kind of look at the place where your trend at the moment is. Normally, a trend is kind of based on a really small subculture. A subculture that is not mainstream. So they are, of course, early adapters or maybe even innovators. So you are within the kind of realm of early innovators and early adapters. And you need to make sure, because then a trend becomes mainstream, that the early majority gets kind of the hang of it and finds the trend really interesting. We are going to do that by using the pyramid of technology that you, of course, also already know because you dove into it during TrendLab 1. So the tipping point where the trend is really small in the subculture and is kind of moving to the mainstream, that is where the applied level and the accepted level meet. And of course, you will again see the video by Kurt van Mensvoort about the pyramid of technology. And of course, you know that we are using it in a slightly different way. So I think it's really important to focus on the way that your trend has kind of the capacity to be kind of translated from the operational and applied level to the accepted level. So that's the tension that you are looking for. And that's also the tension that is kind of critical and also the essence of the story that you're going to tell. Because a story needs to have this kind of friction, the tension. And in storytelling, we have a specific word for that, but I'll explain that in a couple of minutes. So try and imagine how your trend will look like. Maybe even when it is already naturalized, when everybody, thinks that the trend is really normal and that humans, of course, do that because it's human nature. And then you can kind of translate it back to the accepted and applied level. What do you need, or what does the trend need to be accepted by the mainstream? So that's what you are looking for, and that's really critical also in being able to tell the story. And also, of course, think about the things that we are normally not thinking about if we think about a trend, the kind of unexpected side effects. As I already told you, the unintended side effects are also a part of the trend and the design itself. It's not something that is kind of happening without us even kind of knowing or us not being able to understand it. It's just that we have kind of this really narrow-sighted way of thinking where we normally don't see these kind of effects. Like, for example, the traffic jam, if you think about the automobile. So also try and fit these developments in. What will happen if this trend become normal? So not about only the trend, but what kind of other things will it affect in the end? And you really need this to come up with a really cool story, and in the end base, of course, a prototype on that story. And yes, of course, here is Mike McLuhan, and what I just told you is completely and totally in line with the medium as a message. So, and now maybe the even more fun part. You are going to tell a story. You are going to write a scenario for a new episode of Black Mirror. And we are doing that via the, quite classic storytelling methodology. So pick a protagonist, pick somebody that is really interested in the trend, or already kind of is into the trend and wants the trend to be kind of mainstream. Then find an antagonist, so the party, if it is a human or maybe it is an organization or it's something else, that kind of prevents the trend to become mainstream. And then describe your story. So what's the incentive to tell the story? What's the complication? And that's the friction, of course. And what's the resolution? So what can your protagonist use to make sure that the trend will become accepted in society? Okay, let's go to the next thing. This is the story scheme. So this is a visual representation of the story that you can tell. And this is, of course, the empathy map, because if you are using a protagonist, you really need to know who the protagonist is. So make an empathy map for your protagonist. And then, of course, we are not going to write everything down, because visualization is a key element in really kind of get a broader insight in that future. So it's not only about the story itself, about the things you've written down, it's also about the mood and the aesthetics. That's why we make a mood board and then a storyboard. Make it really convincing. So that means that the details need to be there. So the more details, the better. Okay, that's it. I think we're done. Have fun, because this is kind of one of the nicest things to do. And remember, the things I mentioned that you can use are only tools, and see them as tools and not as means in itself. Okay, bye.